Hello and welcome back to DriveDriverDriven. I'm Humble and we're back on the MK again for another day of the body pre-fit. So yesterday where we left off, we got a lot done. Kind of a long episode, I know, but there's a lot to cover that I wanted to put in as few episodes as possible because I know if you're going to be building one of these, it's nice to have all of that information in one place. So with that, let's continue with some of the worries I had from last time. My biggest question for last time was, it looked like this hole was drilled in the wrong place. And yes, but if I grab one of my suspension arms here, so you can see on the suspension arm, it's got that kind of like hook or that direct kind of turn to it. And if I put the arm in place here, you can see from above it's not all the way back in the saddle there. Ditto for up front. And then on the side here, you can see there's just not enough room for articulation. So it just needs to go back a little bit. And so what I've done is I've just drawn out a little shape here. Just kind of make this shaped a little bit like bullet bill. So to drag this back and then finish out this hole. And what I did was I sort of took the distance that's in here in the saddle, reduced it by a little bit. Again, we're kind of doing some jazz here. And we're just going to extend this hole out a little bit and make it look intentional. And no one will be the wiser. Up here is another spot where I messed up a little bit because I didn't read, or rather I missed, that in the manual it says to cut these sections together like we did for this one down here. And so these holes need to be joined. There's this larger hole in the back and then two smaller ones in the front, and then you just link them all together. And I missed that needed to be done. So I've drawn the lines out here from our tangents, and I just need to come back and zip that off and then clean up the panel afterward. Also, you may have noticed that the windshield is on and cracked. Well, half of that's true. The windshield is on. Sean stopped by, and while he was here really quick, and I had an extra pair of hands, I got his help to install the windshield and the brackets. Our windshield is actually fine. It's still over in the corner there. This is actually a Caterham S3 windshield that was supposed to go on to the Zero, so that it had these buttons and a thicker frame so that I could use the weather kit that I bought. However, this is the condition it arrived in, which is less than useful. However, it has been useful in this instance because it allowed us to set our gaps, set our our mounting holes without worrying about damaging the windshield at all, because it's already broken. So for these mounting locations down here on the scuttle, the manual says that you should draw a line up from this split here, up 67 millimeters, and then from the back of this panel forward 67 millimeters, and that's where your first hole will go. And then what I did was, for the second one, I just kept it in line with this register that we had drawn so that the bottom of this bracket is level with the bottom of the scuttle line so that visually it's appealing. The manual does offer a measurement for the distance from the top of the windshield to the top of the roll bar. However, it's for the normal roll bar, not the sports bar, which I have equipped. And so the distance for mine is quite a ways off from what it should be in on the stock piece or on the smaller roll bar. In fact, if we just do a measurement here really quick, I'm seeing about 940 millimeters to the bar, whereas the manual says that it should be 900. So I know there is that difference of having the sports bar versus the normal kind of rollover hoop, and I attribute that difference to just having the different bar. Speaking of those differences, the factory also knows that they are different because the standard weather kit that would work with this windscreen with the normal roll bar does not work for the sports bar, and they are manufacturing a different one. So what I had done is I followed the factory build guide and put the windscreen mounting hole locations where the factory says they should go. And what I'm hoping is that when the weather kit arrives, they followed their own build guide when they set up their car, and everything will work as it's supposed to. Next up, what I want to do is before I start tearing everything apart again, just so I can do this fiberglass work, I want to try and fit the nose cone and the hood and verify their locations. But that's going to be kind of tricky because once I pop these clecos off to fit the nose, I'm afraid this panel is going to spring back a little bit. So we'll see. So it did spring back a little bit. What I'm going to try and do is set up a couple of clamps here that might not be in the way. That might be easier said than done. Well, we'll forgo clamps for the moment and just see how the nose looks. Looks like I'm going to need to do a little bit of fitment and adjustment there and consult the manual to see where the end of the nose lands on this panel, see if there's a measurement for that. I know roughly if I put the hood in place, the hood should land on this edge here and then on the back of the nose. And that's one point, but again, I'll have to pull more of these clecos to put the hood in place, etc., etc. So let's just try and do one thing at a time, and we'll see about getting the nose on. Okay, a little more than just the nose cone, but I ended up chasing my tail a little bit because like the rear and the side panels, it's a little bit of chicken and egg. The method they tell you in the manual is to set your hood on first, get it nice and square up against the cowl, and then you mark a line up here where the end of the hood meets. And I had done that for both sides, but I found that this side just needed some sanding on this edge. I got to go back and straighten it out, but for now it sits nice and flush here up against the cowl. I'm not too worried about it because we're going to have a little piece of trim that goes over the edge, just like here on the GBS. There's this little bit of piping that goes around the edge. We'll have the same thing here. It's just a piece of trim that goes around the edge all the way across the side or across the back here. So I'm not too worried, but really what I wanted was to see this sit flush up against the cowl. So with that done, the hood itself kind of springs out a little bit. So setting its distance, making sure that everything is sitting proper is a little bit difficult. I ended up having to use tape to tape the hood down this way, tape the hood back this way to secure it. And once that was all done, I could, again, mark this distance and get that distance set. So once you have this marked, you take the hood off, set it aside, grab your nose cone, and right now this is just clamped in. It's not fastened to the chassis yet. But you grab your nose cone, set it in place on the chassis, and you're going to line it up where this kind of reduction in diameter is, where the hood sits on it. You're going to kind of line that up with the mark that you made earlier, and then you're going to draw another mark where the end of the nose cone hits the chassis. That's the second mark here. And again, we're getting a little bit into jazz because and I've said that a couple of times. What I mean by jazz is it's a little bit interpretive, it's a little bit of freestyle, and you're going to need to do what works for your chassis, your body, etc. So in the instructions, they give you a couple of measurements up here for 880 millimeters and 850 millimeters from the front edge of your scuttle panel. This nose cone should be, well, the end of the nose cone should be about 850, and the edge of the hood should be about 880, give or take. My measurements were a little off, so what I ended up doing was get the hood in place first on both sides, and then once I had the hood set up, is to take the nose cone and sort of scoot it ever so slightly in until it looked like I had an even gap all the way here around the hood and the nose cone. So it looked like I have an even fitment. That measurement's not going to be exact. It's not going to be the same as what the manual says, but this is where kind of our interpretation, where our jazz sets in, and you want to do what looks good to carry sort of the body panels, to get your shut lines right, to get your body lines right, because if you follow the exact measurements, it might be all wonky. So there's a little bit of play in how things line up here. While I was fitting everything, because on the hood, there's a couple of modifications you need to make, which is you have to clearance down here on this leading edge and trailing edge on both sides. And since I was already making a mess with fiberglass, I figured I'd trim out the rest of these panels. So you can see I didn't go the full length. I decided to stop a little bit short. And I'm glad I did, because it's easy to make a hole bigger. It's less easy to make the hole smaller. I still got to clean this up, but if I grab one of the suspension pieces here, so just setting that into place, you can see we have basically full travel for the suspension now. I'm not too worried about it. With that extra clearance, I got to come up and clean this a little bit, and then that'll be all good. And then ditto for up here, just clean up around the edges a little bit, and that's all good. But I got to wait till this panel's off to do that. We have to drill or make as many holes as we can now before the body gets painted. So that includes things like the latches here. So the latches are set kind of preliminary. I know we're missing some stuff. There's, you know, some foam trim that I want to put under here. There's more up here and up here. There's that flashing I mentioned earlier that has to go on. So that's going to take up some of the slack in these latches. But for now, I did have to rivet these, just again to sort of hold everything into place and to make my measurements repeatable. I'm not too worried about it. I could just drill the rivets, pop everything out, and I have black rivets that will replace these silver ones that should stand out a bit less. So really the last piece I need to do for the nose is there is a panel that you make on your own. It's a little Z panel that fits in this area, and it picks up off of the lower chassis member or the steering rack mount, and then it attaches down here to the front of the nose cone just to support it and keep it from flapping around. And then There is another one that goes up in here, kind of on the chassis rail, so you can bolt the nose down, and that's really all that holds it on. I would like to have something a little more quick release, either Zeus fasteners or whatever, that I can just quickly pop in the side and take the nose off if needed. One of the things I do like about the Zero is it has 3 bolts and the nose comes right off, and it's fairly well supported. So I would like to come up with a similar solution for the MK. Whether, again, like I said, I employ some Zeus fasteners, which would just pick up on the side here, and then one underneath, or something similar. Oh, last but not least, didn't show it on camera because, but there's not much to this. I cut out the hole for the gas filler cap. This is another thing that's going to differ from the manual because my filler neck is in a different location. So normally your filler neck is going to be kind of back here in the corner. Mine's sort of in and towards the middle of the tank. That changes how and where you have to put your filler neck on the panel. So what I did was I tried to put it as high as possible, as far this way as possible, but you can see through here, there is this rear support brace that comes up. So you got to kind of dodge that a little bit. And so I might end up moving the tank just a little more to the passenger side to line the filler neck up with our filler on the back here. And then get a piece of hose and just make a 90-degree bend and call it done. There's one last thing before I can really call these panels done. I do want to cut out this exhaust hole. I need to do a little bit of research tonight and make sure that where I'm placing this is going to work for the K24 application. Basically, it's where the engine mount sits in relation to the side of the engine and where the exhaust exits. And I got to pour through some photos and videos just to make sure it's going to work physically like I think it's going to work. And then the other thing I need to do is here inside the chassis, all these pickup points for the roll cage, right here all the way through, I need to drill those through the panel here. And a friend of mine had a good idea that I might try, and that is as you're drilling from the backside of the panel, because that's kind of how you have to do it, is I'm going to use a transfer punch to mark the panel to have a center hole. But as I drill, I'm going to start with a small drill bit. I'm going to support this side of the panel with a piece of wood. And then, of course, tape, of course, to try and minimize the amount of like chipping, etc., that happens as I drill through it. And then once that small hole is created, I'm going to come through the panel this way with like a step bit and see if the panel will tolerate that as far as making a larger hole without too much tear out. All right, so first on the side panel here, I had a little bit of tear out when I sent it through from the inside, but it wasn't a big deal because I was using the step bit from this side, and these still got to go quite a bit bigger. They have to be able to fit these aluminum plugs. So these need to sit flush with the chassis inside here. And so this hole has to be opened up about yay big. And so once this is off the car, I'll open this up to a little bit bigger than this aluminum slug. And that way there's a little bit of wiggle room. And then when it's time to actually put this on the car for good, I'm going to have some carbon trim rings cut out with basically like a 3D printed plug that can go in and fill that circle when the roll cage itself isn't on. So there are going to be dots down the side of the car, but it'll actually look like finished pieces. So with those out of the way, it was back up to the front for a bit of a struggle bus. Again, kind of the biggest problem with setting all the panel gaps and everything yourself is repeatable measurements. 2 rivets under this panel here, and I decided to use the rear rivet location and replace it with a riv nut so that I could send a bolt down through this panel, and into the chassis. And it seemed like a great idea, except there's a little bit of springiness in the panel here that wants to pull out, and then there's a little bit of springiness in the nose that wants to pull in. So trying to feed the bolt down through both of those panels, line everything up, and not cross-thread that riv nut was quite a pain. As a result, the hole that I drilled for the nose cone here I need to fiddle with it a little bit so I can pull the nose in and then forward, like literally just a couple of millimeters, or just shave a little bit off the leading edge of the hood here. Either or will accomplish the same goal, and that is to restore my shut line and then be able to pull this in so it matches the body line a little bit better. Because as you can see, it kind of sticks out a little bit here in the front, but it's nice and flush in the back. Kind of ditto for the other side here. It just sticks out a little bit, but it's nice and flush in the back here. I still don't have the front mount under here. And then there's one other thing that I need to address, which is this area on the body that's sticking out past the nose. My idea is to cut some wedges here in this panel and try to bend it over and maybe drill through it and rivet it or something like that to see if I can pull this just inside enough, if there's enough leeway on the panel. But that's going to take a little bit of figuring out. The other option is to try and cut this back a little bit, but I don't want to do that either if I don't have to, because the area you'd have to cut it back to is here against the lower chassis rail, and that would sort of leave basically this area. You'd have to come up here, come up to this, and I'd probably dump this area up here and just come back to this first chassis rail all the way down, or something like that. And you would lose all this stuff, which would leave kind of an open hole here behind the nose cone. And I'm not too much of a fan of that look. I like having this panel, even though it's full of holes, I like having this sort of filling in the area here. It just makes it look a little more complete to my eyes. So we'll see what we can come up with. A couple things I didn't mention about these hood clips. The measurements for these guys is different from what was in the manual. This is a different style of clip that has a kind of a safety latching mechanism, so you can't pull this and have it pop off. There's a little tab here you got to push down and then it'll come up. Don't mind that. I only sunk one rivet in there. So normally it'll have 2 rivets in the bottom, but I only wanted to put one in just for this temporary fitting. But anyway, so there's this little safety clip, so you can't accidentally or nudge it or whatever to get over that over center point and have it pop and have your whole hood come off. So with these, I did follow a little bit of what it said in the manual. Again, jazz, all that stuff. What I did was I came 70 millimeters back from this edge to measure this point, this leading rivet. And then I came up, I think it was like just 10 mil or something like that off of this bottom ledge. Or maybe it's 20 mil. Yeah, maybe it's 20 mil. So it's 20 mil up off this bottom ledge. So it's nice and flat. And I sunk these rivets in. For the bottom here, I pulled everything closed, and then I drew an outline, which you can kind of see on the tape here. And I drew that outline around the base, and then when I opened it up, I could just put a little pen mark, you can see there, where that latch sits, and then drill through it, and then sink a rivet in down here, pull everything in place, and now when I shut it, it just pulls it down. The way this kind of measured out is this top hole goes through the chassis rail, and the bottom hole goes in just below it. That's just how it worked out for me, but your mileage may vary. It just depends on your application or how you decide to do things, but this is where it ended up for me. And it's like that. I copied that same measurement on all four corners. So it's 70 mil in from the edge of the panel, 20 mil up from the bottom of the panel, and it's the same. So it looks visually the same at all four corners of the hood. And then when it comes time to paint, what I'm going to do is drill all these rivets out so they're no longer in the panel. And then that way when everything comes back, I don't have to drill through fresh paint. Speaking of fresh paint, as much as I want to fit the rear fenders, I'm not going to be able to because I don't have the rear suspension on to set the wheel center or anything like that. And I really don't want to build it all up just for the sake of getting the fenders on, because where the fenders will be going onto the body will be hidden by the fender. So even if I do have to drill through it and I mess it up, what I plan to do is use some bed liner inside of the wheel well and actually inside of the fenders too to protect them. You have to have the wheel, the suspension, everything in place and at right height to set your wheel center line. And then on the fender, you want your wheel center line to be middle of the fender at right height, so that as the suspension moves through its travel or whatever, it doesn't look weird by having the wheel too far forward or too far back. And so I'm just going to do that after the body comes back from paint, which means I think we're more or less done with the body pre-fit. Like I said, I still got to widen these holes out, but as far as the chassis goes, all of the holes are drilled, all of the rivets are ready, the nose cone is in place. There's just one little piece I have left to do here, which is that bottom mount here in the nose. But other than that, like I think it's done. I don't think there's anything else that needs to have a hole drilled. Oh, there is one thing I forgot. Okay, I don't know if I mentioned before, but there are two or three, let's say three more holes to drill. Up here on the scuttle, I need to drill holes for the windshield wipers. Now, in the factory manual, it specifies a location for right-hand drive cars, and that sets up the wipers so that they're primarily on this side and they wipe across for the driver's view. I have a left-hand drive car, and I need to make sure that I have the right wipers, well, and get the measurements for the left-hand drive position of where to put, because normally you would measure from the center line, and the wipers themselves are offset a little bit because of how the arms work, etc. But I need to make sure that for a left-hand drive vehicle that they end up in the correct location, or to make sure that I have the correct arms, which may not be the case. So, but otherwise, other than that, I think everything else, all the other holes that need to be drilled are drilled. And so I think I can tear this all back down again and it can go out for paint. Well, then we can start building the chassis proper and start a real beginning, rather than this 3 steps forward, 2 steps back we find ourselves in. It's kind of weird seeing the car, what looks like nearly complete, and then we're going to just tear it right back down to the chassis. But that's sort of how these builds go, is you end up building the car sometimes 3 or 4 times nearly complete, and then tearing it all back down to do it all again one final time. So we'll get the body out for paint, get everything back. While the body's out for paint, the rear diff carrier will go out to be welded up, basically to support the kind of power that we're going to throw at it. And all that stuff's going to come back at the same time. And when it does, we can start throwing everything in the chassis. So that being said, I think that's going to be the end, we'll say, for the body pre-fit process. If you're doing this, or you have done this, and you have any questions or any tips for anyone who might be doing the same, drop them down in the comment below. Just because there, I'm sure, is a better way to go about this than what I've done, and I'd be interested to see any feedback. That being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you next time.